Okay, so today I want to talk about The Dark Crystal and why I think it's an incredible film and why it's one of my favorite films. But interestingly enough, when I first saw the film, I was not a fan. I just honestly found it hard to get invested in the film because it was unlike anything I'd ever seen at the time. But that's the thing about The Dark Crystal. Despite how much I love it, it's far from a film for everyone. And that's kind of why I'm making this video, to give the point of view from someone who initially didn't like the film but came to really enjoy it, and the reasons why. But before I get into everything I love about the movie, I'm going to start off with the negatives and why I think it's still a good film regardless. Despite what you guys might be expecting, I actually really enjoy the puppet work and think it still holds up today, but there are aspects of it that definitely don't. What can kill it for me is when there are some very specific scenes where the gelfling texture and complexion on the skin just looks really bad and it can really take you out of it. And it seems like it has something to do with the lighting, but regardless, it still does not look good. But besides that, it's incredible to look at, and a blast to look at too. And to the people that say that the puppets don't hold up, remember that just because you're looking at a puppet, and you know it's a puppet, doesn't mean that it doesn't hold up. The amount of craft that went into making each individual puppet and creating the world behind the Dark Crystal is to be commended.
Henson's Creature Shop devised a Skeksis costume that was suspended off the principal performer's hips. The Skeksis head was essentially a hand puppet that the performer operated above his own head while viewing his work on a tiny TV monitor inside the costume.
Yeah, you comfortable, Dave?
Oh, so yes.
But that was just the beginning. The principal performer also operated one of the Skeksis arms. The other arm, along with all of the facial expressions and eye movements, were controlled by additional performers using remote cables similar to the cables that operate bicycle handbrakes. The assistant performers trailed alongside each character, just off camera, operating the various cables. This arrangement allowed the Henson puppeteers to create, on set, some of the most complex fantasy characters ever devised.
He loses the battle, and as a result, he's banished. And if you consider that all these Skeksis who have to strip him and banish him from the kingdom have, besides their own performers in them, they also have the 3 to 4 people, or 2 to 4 people. You've got Grand Central Station moving. And it was quite something to have everybody just moving, as you have a small army moving.
And that's not to say just because you work hard on something that automatically makes it good, but the fact that they were able to accomplish what they accomplished, especially in 1982, it's astounding. And while we're still on the topic of puppets, it's not hard to notice when they switch out the puppets for real actors. But you can't really hold it against the film because, of course, there are going to be some shots you're not going to be able to get with a puppet, and that's just the way it is. I think the biggest complaint that has to be made is with some of the dialogue and delivery in some of the scenes.
Master, I'm not ready to go alone, all right? Alone, then. All right? Together, then. What's the great conjunction? You tell me.
We were dream-fasted, you and I.
This place is weird. Who is Augur, anyway? One of these things?
Admittedly, there are some pretty cringe moments when it comes to the performances, but once again I find it hard to hold it against the film since not only do I just find it amusing, but many of these lines weren't even meant to be in the film itself. If you didn't already know, in the original cut of the film, the Skeksis didn't speak English, so most of the film was either silent, in a foreign language, or in English, which was established as Gelfling. Since there's actually a really early cut of the film circulating online, I think it'd be fun just to go over some of the differences real quick. Besides the fact that there's no big opening voiceover, in the scene between Jen and his master, he's actually told explicitly about the Dark Crystal and how he must mend it.
The rule of the Skeksis has brought pain, and evil Gotham serve the Dark Crystal.
The Dark Crystal? What is that?
Mark well this crystal shard. A Gelfling must restore it to its rightful place and heal the wound of the dark crystal. You are that Gelfling wanderer.
There's a small scene after the death of the Skeksis Emperor, which involves some sort of ritual. I'm not really sure what's going on there. The Skeksis, like I said earlier, are busy not speaking English. We are also met with an extra scene of Jen talking with another mystic before he goes off on his quest.
The task is set for the disciple. Jinn, find the dark crystal, find the shard, find Ogra.
Where? And what is Ogra?
On high hill, watching the heavens, sits the dome of Ogra, keeper of secrets.
But Urza, I haven't been outside the valley since you found me.
Well, know this, Gelfling. Unless you gain your goal, before the three made one look down, the foul Garthim hordes will kill you and destroy all things old and good. Now go.
Augur was also voiced by another voice actor, as shown here.
Gelfling, you're dead. Gotham killed them all you can to be Gelfling. You look like Gelfling. You understand Gelfling. Because you are Gelfling.
Instead of the last shot being of the renewed lands, it's actually of the Crystal Castle reborn in the crystal itself. And besides a few little things like the lack of voiceovers, that's the bulk of the changes. Getting back to my criticisms of the film, there's one that I've yet to mention. Being that the film tends to drag around the halfway point when Jen and Kira go back to her podling village. They sing a song, have a dance party, and Jen throws a fit.
I wish I'd never heard of this shard.
No, Jen!
It's pretty pointless. Even though it's really only about a 15-minute stretch of events, if you weren't sold by this point, this wasn't going to get you. And that pretty much does it for me when it comes to negatives. Now we can move into what I really like about the film. What I really love about The Dark Crystal is how its story is so simple and straightforward, yet the world it manages to create in that time, it extends beyond the film itself. Because if you really think about it, the film is just go to point A to point B to point C with some meandering in the middle, and that's your story. But of course that's dumbing it down, but in a very general sense, that's true. And yet despite all that, what really manages to stand out in The Dark Crystal is the world that it builds, from the culture of the Skeksis, to the war of the Gelflings, to even just what lives in the world itself outside of the story.
I wanted to create the world first. I wanted to start with a visual world of what these characters looked like and what the whole place was. Plants, trees, rocks, all of that, and then have the story grow.
And for those of you who are interested, there's actually a Dark Crystal prequel series in the form of a comic book called Creation Myths that goes into the first Great Conjunction and Augur's role in it, and it's actually pretty cool.
1,000 years ago, there was a great conjunction. I was there.
Just the way that this film is able to capture pure evil and pure adventure at the same time plays into the theme of duality that goes throughout the whole film. And besides all that other stuff, this film just really exposed me to different ways on how to make a film. This film affected me so much that when I had to make a short stop-motion film on Hamlet, I just used clay puppets and tried to pass it off as stop motion. And that's my big takeaway from The Dark Crystal, just how inspiring it's been to me. When you see so much hard work and passion culminate in such a perfect film, it's hard not to be inspired. And besides The Dark Crystal being one of my biggest inspirations, Jim Henson alone is one of my idols. A man so invested in what he loved doing, yet still tried to make the world a better place with everything he did.
He convened a group of 20 or so people in London. And Jim actually said at that meeting, as Jim could do, let's do a children's show that brings peace to the world. He actually said that. And we, who had been around him for a long time, took it at face value and said, oh, all right, well, sure.
What's a little saddening about the whole thing is that Jim Henson will never know how important this movie has been to so many people so many years after his death. Producers and test screeners who saw the early cut of the film that we looked at earlier genuinely did not like it at all.
I remember going to a screening in Universal with the executives for the first time, showing them Dark Crystal. And the movie went on for an hour and a half, whatever it took. And the movie went off. It was dead silence. The executives walked out the room, didn't say a thing to Jim or me. And he really felt lousy then. They just stood up and walked out. Not a word was spoken after 2-3 years in this movie.
But he didn't care. He did everything he did just to see if he could.
Challenging people was one of the most fun things, I think, for my father. And with the bicycle scene, what the heck, have him ride in a figure eight and then go on. It really didn't make a big difference to the scene. He loved to just challenge him.
I'm sure Jim didn't think in terms of boundaries at all the way the rest of us do. I mean, we can't do that because, we can't do this because, and we couldn't go there because, there are always these fences that we build around ourselves and our ideas. Jim seemed to have no fences.
Jim was really intrigued by the work of the British illustrator Brian Froud, and he wanted to translate Froud's visual ideas to 3 dimensions, which became the basis for the film The Dark Crystal. He wanted to go off and push that envelope, and whether it's successful or not, he just wanted to do it.
Frank Oz is credited as the co-director of the film. When asked about it recently, he had this to say.
You've done a bit of directing, I think. Jim put you into something you directed. It was the Dark Crystal, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, but that I didn't direct that movie with him. Jim directed that movie. It was his vision, and this is typical Jim. I remember flying over to London with Jim, and he had been working on Dark Crystal for about a year or 2 before I came on board, and.
This was his attempt to sort of redo like a modern Grimm's fairy tale,
yes,
wasn't
it? He wanted that texture.
He was quoted as saying he thinks kids should be frightened.
They should. He absolutely believed that. He believed that was a cathartic thing for kids. He didn't believe in being safe to kids. I flew over with Jim after he'd been working for 2 years, and he took me aside and he said, Frank, do you want to direct this movie with me? Now, this is basically a $200 million movie, okay? And I said, what? Jim, I have never directed. How the hell can I direct? Why would you want me? And this is Jim. He says, because I think it would be better. And that's all he cared about. He knew that there were some shortcomings he had that I could fill. And all he cared about was making a good product, good work.
And that just goes to show how kind and genuine of a person he was. And when it really comes down to it, that's what I see The Dark Crystal as. A really genuine movie made by a really genuine guy. And the final product is just this mix of wonder and fear and excitement and imagination that's so appealing to me. It's a movie that whenever I watch it, it's something special. And that's why I can't deny that The Dark Crystal is one of my favorite films of all time. But yeah, those are pretty much all my thoughts on The Dark Crystal. If you disagree, leave a comment, start a conversation. That's why I'm here. And I'll see you next time.